Pumori is an elegant pyramidal peak. It straddles the border between Nepal and Tibet. It rises up to 7,161 meters above sea level. Pumori is often called Everest's daughter. It casts a long shadow over the Khumbu Valley. Pumori is a technically difficult 7,000er and really a peak of great beauty. Its avalanche-prone slopes and history of tragedies makes it a rarely chosen option for climbers. Pumori lies just 8 km west of Mount Everest. Rare views of the summit of Everest, Lhotse and Nuptse can be seen from Pumori. Pumori's classic route follows the southeast stretch and usually requires 3 camps. The ascent, which in the first part is affordable, is complicated by around 6,000 meters with serac barrier. One of the greatest dangers of Pumori is its propensity to avalanches, which are formed and triggered by falling pieces of serac mainly in an area close to 6,200 meters. Pumori has often been associated with drama and death. The mountain has been especially cruel to Spanish climbers. 9 Spanish climbers have been died in 2 separate avalanches in 1989 and 2001. The mountain's worst moment came during the 2015 earthquake. A great part of Pumori's ridge collapsed, triggering a monster avalanche that reached Everest Base Camp and killed 22 people. In the fall of 2001, 10 Basque climbers flew to Nepal to attempt Mount Pumori. They were all young people who traveled to the Himalayas for the first time, although they did have experience in other mountain ranges in the world. Before coming to Nepal, they were looking and studying other mountains, Amadavalam, Bronze, and Annapurna 4, but in the end they leaned towards Pumori. It met all the characteristics. Certainly, it was a dangerous peak, but also aesthetically beautiful and with a tempting altitude that exceeded 7,000 meters. It was suitable to climb quite quickly, since some of the expedition members had a month of vacation. Before taking on Pumori, the group climbed Island Peak for acclimatization. Among the climbers, Venancio Eroreta was a veteran mountaineer. The others who accompanied him were all very young, some of them his mountain children. They had met the previous year in the Andes and conceived the jumps to the heights of the Himalayas. In early October, they set up tents at the base camp. On the 11th of October, everyone celebrated together the birthday of Bennett and Venancio. They prepared a material warehouse at a height of 5,700 meters and then set up Camp 1 at about 6,200 meters above sea level. Xavier Osenald had his head to burst with altitude sickness, and Venancio advised him that it would be better to descend to Periche. Venancio helped him to go down to Periche. Venancio was apprehensive, and before leaving he told the young climbers that Pumori aroused some concern. In 1991, while on Everest, he saw an avalanche drag down a young Frenchman and a Sherpa on the slopes of Pumori. But the expedition was forged above all by the initiative of the young climbers. They were the ones who pushed the project forward, and Venancio did have some doubts, but he could have the illusion of going with the young people. The climbers knew that the most dangerous stretch of Pumori was the one between the first and second camp. Juan for Ascona, a Basque climber who climbed to the top of Pumori in 1991, had advised them not to pass that dangerous stretch more than once. Only cross it when going to the top and in the early morning, when the cold keeps the upper layer of snow and ice welded. Analyzing the attempt to climb to the top, the group decided that two routes had to be prepared. Everyone was looking forward to go off. Arit Artida, Cesar Neto, Benat Arroyo, Iñaki Erza, and Javi Arcauz left the base camp on the 16th of October. Since they were a large group, the members of the expedition decided to attempt the summit in two groups. That same day, they arrived at Camp 1. From there, they left around midnight on the 17th of October, with the purpose of reaching the summit that same day. They knew that the section exposed to avalanches had to be crossed in the early hours of the morning, when the ice blocks of the southeast wall are welded by the night cold. The 5 young climbers waited, left the southeast base behind for dawn, and crossed to the northeast edge to a small gorge that separated the two slopes at 6,600 meters. They knew that from there up the route was much safer. They had to make radio call to base camp as soon as they reached that point. But that dawn did not bring a beautiful day. It did not bring news from the 5 young climbers. Neither at dawn, nor at noon, nor at the rainbow of the sunset. One has to imagine the cautious advance of the 5 splitting the darkness. The dry blows of ice axes in crampons on the hardened snow. They would be excited, tense, already looking towards the line of the mountain that would open the way to the summit. They had the privilege of getting ahead to discover what they didn't know and wanted to know. Suddenly, no more than a distant heat, a thunder without a storm, and an increasingly enveloping roar. Feeling of bewilderment, a lack of spatial references at night. Then a few moments of chaos, of loss of notions of situation. Some useless attempt to oppose the overwhelming current, and finally, nothing. Silence again. A massive avalanche struck and swept away the young climbers down the face. The avalanche hit the Basques when they were just 50 meters above their camp, which they had pitched at around 6,200 meters above sea level. The avalanche carried them some 800 meters down the face. This side of the mountain has a long history of avalanches that have resulted in fatal consequences. All 5 victims were in their 20s. They did everything right. It wasn't their fault. The accident happened when they started going off. In the morning, during the hours when avalanches don't usually happen. Sometimes, however, the mountain gives shocks and surprises that cannot be predicted and controlled. In the base camp, Jon Orrizola, Jesus Mari Erazu, and Xavier Ostoza were alarmed by the delay. They were activating their walkie-talkies all day and asking for change in the hope of hearing a voice from the other side. But they received no more answer than cruel silence. It seemed that Pumori woke up at the same time as the 5 young climbers at dawn, but in bad temper, furious and yawning. The restlessness took hold of the three young people at base camp. When the tension became unbearable, Ostoza requested a reconnaissance helicopter from the agency that had organized the expedition. On the 18th of October, early in the morning, the agency sent a helicopter to Pumori. It landed at Gorakhship to pick up Ian Urrizola. It didn't take long for the pilot to communicate the sighting of two sleeping bags among the remains of a huge avalanche. That same morning, Venancio Eroreta and Xavier Osinault were returning to the base camp from Periche. The two spent 3 days in the village, until Xavier Osinault recovered from altitude sickness. They returned to the foot of the mountain knowing that it was going to be a day of attempt to the summit. That's when they heard the chopping sound of a helicopter over their heads. Seeing a helicopter in the Himalayan skies is a bad sign. As soon as they saw it, they accelerated their pace. They felt an increasingly tight knot in their throats, and when they heard some boss climbers from some hikers coming down from Gorakhship, they hurried much more. When arrived at base camp, they were told that there had been no trace of the 5 young climbers since yesterday's morning. Venancio couldn't believe it. He needed to see with his own eyes what had happened. Experience and instinct told him that an avalanche would have been occurred on the mountain, and that it would have been caught the 5 climbers as they were going up the mountain. Considering the way the mountain looked, he thought they would have fallen toward Everest base camp. So he headed there in the morning to find out what had happened. From a height of 5,500 meters, he saw some items of clothing on the glacier. He went where the suspicions indicated him, and there he saw the coat of a team member stained with blood, a broken camera, the fantax of Iñaki Erza. He put it in his rucksacks and continued on his way. The sign of the avalanche was clearly visible on the mountain. The terrain was extremely unstable. He continued upwards, and when he reached a top 20 meters away, he found 3 bodies on a large snowy slope. It was a hard blow for him. The risk of snow avalanches was not as imminent as the avalanche of feelings that hung over his head. When the doubts were clarified and it was confirmed that the 5 mountaineers were dead, Venancio took some photos and returned. In those moments of trouble, the remaining 5 who stayed at base camp felt the need to warn their relatives. At first, the relatives wanted to bring the bodies, either to help them closer or to give them the last farewell, or to see with their own eyes the painful test of bad luck. The relatives asked that everything possible should be done. It was impossible for Venancio and his colleagues to retrieve the bodies of their friends. So the Italian Silvio Mondelli and some of the members of Adorne Fashaban's group who were in the area offered help in those difficult moments. On the 25th of October 2001, they were trying to recover the bodies when another massive avalanche roared down the mountain slope. Without consequences, but that served to realize the great risk they were taking. The group gave up on the retrieval of the bodies due to the high risk of avalanches. Arit Arteda, Cesar Neto, Benat Arroyo, Iñaki Erza, and Javi Arcauz were going to have stayed there forever. The rest of the members returned on the 27th of October 2001. They gave the relatives the clothes and other belongings that the unfortunate climbers had left at the base camp. A few years later, some of the relatives of the deceased traveled to Pumori to see those landscapes that appear in the photos, to see those places where their children were so happy, to say the last goodbye to their children, to their brothers who stayed there on the Pumori. Watching Pumori did everyone good. They felt closer to their children, to their brothers. They saw where they were and returned home more relaxed. Thank you all so much for watching.